In a world of pro wrestling podcasts, this is certainly one of the newest. This is Whacked Out Wrestling. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Whacked Out Wrestling. And we don't have, and for some week that's been owned by All In, we are not All In here, as I'm Thomas S.K. Green. Joey the Caveman isn't on with us tonight, but we have John Roche here with us.
Hello?
And this was pretty much one of those weeks where, honestly, I didn't see enough of the show this week on it. But considering that All In was the biggest thing this week, that's pretty much what everybody's eyes were on, even more than what the WWE could do this week. So that's pretty much the big focus of this show.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this was and the final thing was what happened by the Elite this week was almost amazing, and I have no doubt that one day, if they stay together and don't sign with the WWE, Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks will put on the greatest wrestling show that we have ever seen. This was not that show.
Well, I mean, you have classics like Bash 89, WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania X 7.
Mm-hmm. Well, in theory, the problem was that this show was very good if you did, and if you find it somewhere, I would highly recommend it. It's on New Japan World right now, so if you go for it, it's definitely worth the show. But the problem with the show was the blocking of that show was absolutely terrible.
The blocking, like
basically how you script out the show and how you book. Okay, this is going to be this long. This is going to be this long. This is going to be this long, like any other play or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Basically, the problem on this was that there was a lot of very good matches, but the thing that killed it was going 30 minutes for the Kazuchika Okada versus Marty Scurll match, which was a very good match, but that was just not good to do it. It basically killed the main event completely for it. There was multiple times where they said, just go home already. Go home. No, seriously, go home. Go home or you're out of Bullet Club. Go home, you assholes. And they said, nope, we got to go 30. Ric Flair always went 30. We have to. Then Okada has to do it as well. So.
Yeah, I'm looking at a recap of it. I myself did not see it, have not seen it yet, of course, but it looks like it's kind of interesting in that not a single match that they list on the official results, not a single match was shorter than 10 minutes, which is pretty interesting anyway, because, like a lot of shows, even big pay-per-views by WWE, they've had like 2-minute squashes.
Yeah, and that's really the big thing, because there was a lot of very good long matches on this show, and this was an all wrestling pay-per-view itself, and that in itself was interesting. But the problem is that there was also a case where it would be like Andy Reid in the NFL, where he's a very good coach, but he has no idea how to book his timeouts or things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, looking at the whole thing, I guess if I could describe it in terms of old pay-per-views, since I had brought up some of the classic ones, mm-hmm. So I would sort of describe it as being like Super Clash 3 if it were good.
Yeah, and that was very good, because this was a joy for wrestling fans to love wrestling, but there was a few things that were questionable on it. Like, even with this is a wrestling show for wrestling fans. If they swapped the Hangman Page versus Joey Janela match with, say, the Christopher Daniels versus Stephen Amell match, that would have probably made the show a bit better as well. And even that match, just having the guy from Arrow in it, it was good. Like, I'd secretly question Stephen Amell or Ronda Rousey. Who's the better celebrity turned wrestler?
which is kind of interesting because Ronda Rousey actually obviously Ronda Rousey, she has an MMA background, so she knows how to like throw down for real.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, Stephen Amell, I don't know if he does his own stunts on Arrow. Like a lot of the wrestling stuff is kind of similar to like you might have to do as a Hollywood stuntman.
Yeah.
In respects.
Yeah, and even then, Amell is also, it's the case where on the one hand, if you, any good athlete or good actor, if you rehearse it over and over again, it's going to end up being a pretty good match, and they could put on a good match, but keyword, a good match. And Amell hasn't wrestled enough to make sure that it could go past, okay, he knows how to do this match very well. But even when he was doing matches in WWE with Cody there, he was still a pretty good at it. Nothing special, but if he wanted to give it a try, he could probably do really well.
Yeah, and I mean, he's up against Daniels. Daniels has been pretty well regarded himself, and a lot of that is like that's one of the big secrets. Even if you yourself are not that great, like if you go up against the right guy, he can make you look like you belong. It's like with Ric Flair or Shawn Michaels in their primes, carrying a broomstick. And I mean, Stephen Amell is much better than a broomstick, but yeah, I'm going with this.
Of course. And that also adds that one where if you have a good worker and you can rehearse the match enough so that everybody's got it down pat, there's no reason anyone can't have a good match. And that basically just goes through most of the card, where just having that match switch with Paige versus Janela helps the card immensely, because otherwise you have the very underarching feeling that you have in the middle. Cody Rhodes defeats Nick Aldis. He finally wins the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. He wins his father's title back. It's in the hands of the Rhodes family. The first ever father and son to both hold the same world title in pro wrestling history. Only the second father and son duo in wrestling history who can both call themselves a world champion. This was followed with Dick Druids.
Yeah, it seems like it would have been like, Daniels Amell between Rhodes and Aldis and Lethal and Gordon. I mean, it could have been a breather match. It could have been like something to keep the crowd amped up.
Yeah. Well, that's also a plus with at least this one, where there wasn't much in the way of storyline, but everything that they did in storyline was very good for it. Like, for instance, I think the Battle Royal on this card that was on the pre-show may have been one of the best Battle Royals ever. They had only about 15 or so people, but every single person in the match had at least one moment. And that's really good for a Battle Royal.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was one where most times in Battle Royals you just feel like everybody in the Battle Royal there's too many people who are just making up numbers, and to be a little bit more impressive for it. But if everybody feels like they were special by the end of the Battle Royal, that's pretty good.
Oh, absolutely. And it seems, and a lot of the times with Battle Royals, it just seems like they're tossing a bunch of guys in the ring to give them a payday and to keep the crowd's attention for a few minutes. Like you said, this one was a genuinely good one. It was reasonably long, and it was. I'm looking at the review on 411. They gave it 3.5 stars. I mean, I didn't see it. I don't know what rating I'd have given it, but they gave the whole show in general an 8 out of 10. So
yeah. Yeah, and that's usually the thing where 411 gave it 3.5 stars. Meltzer gave it 4 doxed abuse shelters out of 5, so that's a plus there.
Oh, good lord.
But it was always those pluses for it, and it had the right ending with Flip Gordon finally getting booked on All In, which ties to the whole thing where for most indie shows you don't see a lot of story, but everything on the show had storyline to it. Even the Dick Druids made perfect sense if you watched Being the Elite, because it was the payoff to a long-standing joke on the show. So you can't really say it was wrong for that either.
Oh yeah, I mean, these are like a lot of. I mean, it seems to have come together pretty well. Wasn't it like part of some bet that Cody Rhodes made?
Yeah, they bet, and that was always the weird question mark where it was bet between Dave Meltzer and Cody Rhodes that Ring of Honor could not get a 10,000 seat arena. Now it's basically a moot point because Ring of Honor and New Japan's show sold out Madison Square Garden, so that's all set. And we know either way, Ring of Honor can sell out 10,000 seats. But when this happened, it was basically, okay, we'll try and sell out 10,000 seats with an indie show. And that was also a good benefit for this because even without that there, everything on this card seems like something that a really good indie could probably pull off.
Oh yeah, and another thing I guess I'm sort of sidetracking from All In to on the subject of Ring of Honor. There was I know these are probably spoilers for Lucha Underground season 4. I myself have not seen these episodes, but Jeff Cobb has basically been tearing through a bunch of guys on Ring of Honor. So
yeah, it isn't that much of a spoiler though, because the big thing with Lucha Underground is that in the last year, and basically since AAA started working with Impact Wrestling, Lucha Underground's firmly moved to, okay, this is a completely separate thing from anything else in pro wrestling now. And as a result, you have something like Matanza can be a monster in Ring of Honor, and Jeff Cobb can be a monster in Lucha Underground, or vice versa in that case.
Yeah.
You can have stuff like Pentagon Jr. and Phoenix being dominant in Lucha Underground and on Impact Wrestling. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's like you said, it's great that they can sort of spread it around, and it's also, I mean, like I said, it's the first time I've actually seen Lucha Underground in a while, and it was actually pretty interesting. Like they had, like the big promo for it was, you don't want to miss the first 10 minutes, and it was all. I don't think you'd really see something like, well, maybe 90s WCW might have done something like this, but you probably wouldn't have seen like an actual storyline outside of the ring other than, Gur, you have a title I want. Gur, you're going to have to fight me to get this title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's always a big question on it, because Lucha Underground works because it's a decent pro wrestling show, but if you look at it as this is Mortal Kombat in a pro wrestling viewpoint, then it's even better than that way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even beyond things like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat's movies or TV shows, it doesn't feel like it. This is straightforward. Okay, there's a bunch of crazy characters and awesome things. They're all going to fight each other. Sometimes those characters are going to die. anybody on the show can beat anyone else on the show. They're all fighting to be the champion. Also, there's some Aztec imagery, Aztec mythology in this one somewhere.
And now they have, I also saw Antonio Cueto for the first time, who is obviously Dario Cueto's father, played by the same guy who played Dario.
Yep. And that's always the other interesting thing, that they're also willing to say, okay, if we have a non-wrestling role, why do we have to have a wrestler in the role? Why not hire a good actor to play the role instead?
Oh, absolutely.
So that helps on these ones, and the fact that Lucha Underground's loosened up to the point where it can spread the wealth to the indie scene has helped a lot of things immensely. Like, it's helped Impact get back on the right track, because now suddenly they have a bunch of red clay prospects everyone wants to see, and WWE can't have them because of this Lucha Underground deal.
Oh, I'm just glad that Impact Wrestling's even on a track at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I don't think they're, are they even the number 2 at this point? Is there
if I was being strict, being honest on it, I'd say right now the level of them, in my theory, would be WWE, then New Japan, then it would probably be a toss up between AAA, Ring of Honor, or Impact. So I could absolutely see it there, but more than likely, I'd say that Impact is about fourth again, above Ring of Honor and MLW. So.
Oh yeah, and I also noticed that I think I might have mentioned this in a previous episode of the podcast, but I found it kind of interesting that when they had brought in Johnny of the Ever Changing Surname, they actually called him Johnny Impact.
Well, it does work on these ones, because that really ties to the big issue where there's not much you can do with this one, where you can't use John Morrison or Johnny Nitro or Johnny Spade or Johnny Blaze or whatever WWF tried to use it for him. No one really knows John Hennigan as John Hennigan. You can't particularly use Johnny Mundo because of Lucha Underground. Screw it, just make him Johnny Impact. And even then, it was also the benefit because of this one, where you have someone who a lot of people wanted in Impact for a very long time, could have probably been a star for Impact, but now Impact can have him because Lucha Underground's blocking WWE from getting him back.
It seems to work out pretty well for, well, everyone but WWE.
Well, that's also the plus, because WWE is at the level where if they want someone, they will have them. So having some top name indie talents that WWE can't have is the only way to help things on it. Really, that's what caused Impact its problems, that if WWE wants someone, they will have them, and there's almost no blind spots anymore that WWE has. Like, when the X division was so big in TNA, it was because they had great stars, and also because WWE was so loaded with WWF and WCW stars, they were absolutely ignoring the indie scene. Likewise, when the Knockouts division started to become the calling card of TNA, it was because WWE was so blinded by models that they completely ignored women's indie wrestlers. And now WWE doesn't ignore those things anymore, so there's any good talent would have a chance at WWE.
Yeah, it's generally good, like not just for for the wrestling fandom in general, but also I think it's good for WWE that they have like that there is like a solid competition, because if you have like, I mean, all shows like All In, or like they're probably gonna make WWE stand up and take notice. I mean, even if they don't say get me Cody Rhodes, obviously they're gonna say like get me someone who can do what Cody Rhodes does, or let's try doing something like this. You know, it'll sort of, because obviously we all know the stereotypical WWE booking style, punch kick finisher, 50-50 booking.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a show that like if their competitors are providing something else, and something else is catching on with fans, who even fans who might not otherwise get into pro wrestling, it's sort, because another big thing with the WWF was that they were like back in the 80s. I mean, when I say WWF, I mean they were big into the crossover stuff, like sort of getting out of just professional wrestling with the whole rock and wrestling thing. And obviously Vince McMahon never wanted to think of it as just wrestling. Like he always used to call the wrestlers superstars. And I think that if these indie shows wind up getting a crowd who might have like stepped out of professional wrestling for a while, but they decided to come back, if they if they broaden the overall audience,
Mm-hmm.
then WWE might look at this and think, maybe if we do something like this, that'll broaden our style. I mean, obviously there's a danger that you wind up getting like everyone doing the same thing in the other direction, but I mean, if it makes WWE like try to change things up, or try to step up their game, try something a little different, I mean, I'm pretty sure that that's going to turn out to be a good thing, at least in terms of, as opposed to what we've had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that also makes stuff like the Stephen Amell match so important to the card, because for the most part, pro wrestling and sports entertainment are related, but they're not totally the same thing. And
Right.
there's a lot of pro wrestling fans out there, and people who love pro wrestling, but when you want sports entertainment, WWE is the only place that can do it really well. And this, at the same time, was the closest thing that an indie promotion has done to being able to put on a WWE-like event. That you have an arena show, you have celebrities, you have a big fan fest beforehand that would make fans want to put more money into things. You have great performers and the top performers in the business at doing things, led by great stories. For lack of a better term, All In was an indie promotion doing a WWE show. And that is what's really the problem. It's never going to be those things like, if a promotion does really good wrestling, that won't worry WWE, because they do wrestling. WWE does entertainment. Like the great line that he said when Ted Turner bought WCW, he said, Vince, I'm in the wrestling business. Great, Ted, I'm in the entertainment business. But it's when companies are willing to do that WWF style and say, okay, we're going to aggregate all the best talent in the world. We're going to get the glitz and glamour. We're going to get the celebrities. We're going to get the huge things surrounding a show. We're going to give you sports entertainment, but with a pro wrestling feel. That's when WWE needs to get their brown pants.
Sorry, I'm just reading over some of the other results,
No problem.
the shows that were going on this week.
Yep. Luckily, the 7 listeners won't care, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the Shield reportedly made bail on a holiday after 10 p.m. Eastern time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's always the plus on these things, because whenever the big weakness on the Shields thing was, you have them arrested, they go through, they make bail, and then every heel on the whole show, including heels who were not even on the show technically, like Drew Gulak, attacks them. And that's in itself a question mark, because then you have this weird question. How come in wrestling we've never seen a heel GM basically say to some undercard baby faces, "Oh, you're friends with this heel face I don't like? Tough shit. You will join me, you will attack them, you will do my bidding, or you're fired." You'd think if you're going to make some evil authority figures against a pissed off employee, that would be a much more natural thing to add to it.
Oh yeah, I think they tried something like that with JBL, or with that whole thing where Shawn Michaels was working for JBL.
Yeah, and they did something similar with Big Show in the authority angle for a bit. So, but you'd think that would be a common part of the evil boss versus pissed off employee storyline. And it helps more because when you see things otherwise, eventually you get to you're trying to make the boss the face. So why are we supposed to cheer for the boss saying, "No, you work for me, you draw a paycheck, so if I say jump, you say how high"?
And apparently, Dolph and Drew are now the tag team champions again.
Honestly, if WWE could have a chance to do something interesting with this whole storyline right now, because if they really wanted to, between Dolph Ziggler suddenly being Intercontinental Champ instead of Elias, and now Dolph and Drew being tag team champs instead of the Revival, WWE could revitalize Dolph Ziggler by just changing the character to, "I had spent 10 years in this company trying to get my chance to be a star, and every time I was passed over, and everybody wanted it for so long, but they never gave me the ball. Well, now I'm taking the ball, and I'm going to make it so that all your little NXT darlings are passed over and passed over and passed over, and they feel what I felt for 10 years. Suddenly, Dolph Ziggler goes from, "Why the hell is he in the main event again?" to, "That's a pretty good main eventer. That's a heel gimmick."
Oh, absolutely. And I was gonna say, isn't that pretty much Triple H's whole angle? Oh, I don't mean in wrestling. I mean in real life. Are you there? Hello? 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 Are you there? You just sort of it sort of went quiet. Okay on your end?
Yeah, but the answer to that one would be the fact that, honestly, even that could work as a feud with Triple H, because it would be, for just too long you held me back, and now Triple H is I'm a good booker who loves the NXT kids and sees them all as my family, and now it's Dolph Ziggler saying, "You held me back for so long, I'm holding them back for so long."
Oh, so in other words, he's screwing with the pet project of the guy who screwed with him.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also works on this whole thing where if the new generation has to succeed, they have to take out the old generation.
So I'm kind of getting flashbacks to the New Blood.
Yeah, and that's honestly the problem on it, because the problem with the New Bloods versus Millionaires Club storyline is that usually the old blood doesn't have the willingness to say, okay, we'll let the new guys beat us. And that's why it worked so well in All Japan, because Jumbo Tsuruta said, sure, you can, the new guys can beat me. And then the Millionaires Club New Blood feud failed because the Millionaires Club said, nope, we're not going to do it. Main Event Mafia failed against the TNA Frontline because eventually Sting said, not only am I not going to do it, I want to be a babyface in this heel stable. And suddenly it dissipates because eventually, if you're going to do it right, the young guys have to prove, okay, we're ready to be main eventers. You can support us again. And if they don't, then suddenly you've hobbled this whole company for the next couple years. Which brings into the Evolution pay-per-view, where we're seeing this as a big example, as we're seeing more and more matches announced for the card, and they basically seem to be older women coming back to wrestle the current generation. And it's a big problem on this one, because their whole story is that women's wrestling has always been terrible. Trish and Lita were very good in the 2000s, but only Trish and Lita. And then when they retired, women's wrestling was terrible. Then the NXT women started making good women's wrestling. They got promoted, and now women's wrestling is good. And if you're going to do that, you can't say, okay, then here's Trish Stratus, here's Lita, here's Melina, here's all these stars from the past. They're all going to come in and have a 50-50 match where they look good against the stars. It's going to make the old stars look, wait, they were pretty good too. But it's going to make the new ones look like, you told us for years these people were terrible, and they're beating up these girls. They must really suck. I'm not caring about this.
Oh yeah, like it looks like one of the things is gonna. Well, I mean, one of the Trish match versus Alexa Bliss is kind of like that, but they seem to be doing, at least from what I'm seeing, Lita versus Mickie James.
And honestly, I wasn't a big fan with the Lita versus Mickie James, because Trish versus Alexa is inspired. Alexa Bliss, for lack of a better term, is the new era Trish Stratus. Put Alexa Bliss in 2002, everyone's waxing poetic about her like they do about Trish. And put Trish Stratus from 2002 into 2016, and people would hate her as much as they hate Alexa right now. Because Trish was good, but she wasn't that good. And so putting those two together works. But with Lita versus Mickie, it's like, we know that Lita doesn't has some neck problems. We know that she can't wrestle a full-time schedule. We know you only get so many one more matches with Lita out there. So if you're going to give us a one more match, give us someone who we've never seen before and we may never have a chance to see again. But it's not that Mickie James is bad in the least. It's just, it's been done.
Yeah, in fact, it was Lita's retirement match in 2006. So.
Yeah, and I could buy from that retirement match that we could absolutely see it as a, okay, we hate that we had Crime Time sell all of Lita's stuff, including a vibrator, and ended the match with the last moment we saw of Crime Time selling Lita's box. Har har. So we're going to give you an apology match, and this time we're going to treat it with the respect and gravitas it deserves. But you could do that with a dream match by, say, Lita versus Sasha Banks or someone like that. You can do that with something like Mickie James versus Alundra Blaze to throw in the older generations of women beyond just that one. You don't have to just have that match again.
Right. I mean, it's like when they had a bunch of the older guys. Like they had Hogan back, they had Flair back. I think they tried doing at least one Hogan Flair match again. And
well, at least it was a good thing on that one because remember, they never did a Hogan Flair match in WWE for it. So at least if you do Hogan versus Flair once, you say, okay, we got Hogan versus Flair in WWE. We've seen it. It was important. Now we can go further.
Right, but I mean, if you're gonna bring someone back, like you said, and well, I was gonna say like, if they're bringing back a bunch of people who were out of the game, like having them like just do a rematch of one of their older matches instead of trying to get over some new talent is kind of a fool's errand.
Yeah, and that's also the problem because it also depends on which talent you use for this as well, where if you use the right talents, then eventually it could work for some good dream matches there, but at the same time, look at some of the talents that they brought back for the women's battle royal instead. On the one hand, you have people like Lita, like Molly Holly, like Jacqueline, like Beth Phoenix, like Trish Stratus, like Brie Bella, all people you could buy as being capable performers. Then you have people like Kelly Kelly, Vicky Guerrero, Tori Wilson. At least Kelly Kelly was a former champion, and could be seen as someone who was a threat there. Vicky Guerrero was a non-wrestler for her whole career. Tori Wilson was terrible even in 2003. We all ignored it because she was beautiful, but she was at the drizzling shits in the ring. Having someone like, say, Tori Wilson fight Becky Lynch would not help the division. It would just make Becky Lynch look bad and make Tori Wilson look less bad for one match.
Yeah,
So really, it just goes with the case where there seems to be some benefits to it, but at the same time, it's time to start giving us some good matches we can sink our teeth into. And this is a problem with how many storylines they've got, because right now, just on the women's side, while you're building to Evolution, we've got 2 matches between Charlotte and Becky Lynch, both for Hell in a Cell and the show in Australia booked. We've got the Iconics versus Naomi and Asuka booked for Australia. So they haven't gotten anything for the Evolution pay-per-view for storyline-wise yet.
So it's mainly going to be like I don't want to say, all I can think of for the Evolution pay-per-view like is the finals of the Mae Young Classic. As far as anything,
and even that's now a question mark. But we're not much of a spoiler place, so we can't really say that one. But that may or may not happen there as well. So really, it just goes to the big problem on this one is how long will the matches be as well? Because if they're short matches, you can give good matches for everyone. And really, every woman on the main roster should have a match at this one. If you can have legends, you can have those ones, but bare minimum, if they're on the roster, they should have a chance to go out have their entrance, and get the cheers they deserve for it. Anything less is hurting the pay-per-view as a whole.
Yeah, anything less would probably defeat the purpose of the pay-per-view.
Yeah. And that was probably one of the weaknesses that they had for the women's rumble, as an example, because you had all these great stars from the past who deserved their chance to, but it was kind of weak on NXT women for the future of it. So
yeah, I mean, it looks like this. I mean, it looks like there are at least, other than Asuka and Naomi versus the Iconics and Flair versus Lynch, what is this, 3 or 4?
I think it's going to be the second one, match when it goes to Australia. So
okay, and then there's also Ronda Rousey and the Bellas versus the Riot Squad.
Yeah, and that seems to make sense. So could be a lot worse. So
yeah, and it looks like that even aside from the Evolution pay-per-view, it does look like they're like at least gives the impression that they're trying to take their women's division more seriously.
Well, yeah, because they have to also get these ones and make sure that now if they're having a super show in Australia, they can have women's matches regularly on the card, as opposed to the next event in the progressive city of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. On the same token, it's going to be so much fun to see WWE saying, oh, look how progressive Saudi Arabia is again, knowing that they just tried to put to death a women's activist there. Yeah. That's going to be bad. But 46 million, not... Hey, anybody would sell out their credentials for that much. Am I right?
They say money talks.
Yeah. But yeah, this week didn't have that much to do on it, but there was so much to go. We didn't want to completely blow it off because this week had the biggest show on it. So
yeah, we had to do something with All In.
Yeah, and that was one of the pluses where even if we didn't technically watch Raw or SmackDown this week, All In was there. So until next week, I'm Thomas Green. With me is John Roach, and hopefully Joey the Caveman will be here as well.
We'll see you next time.
Yep.